The Academy rooftop was supposed to be off-limits after midnight, but rules had never stopped Warrant Officer Kieran Voss from finding places where the air felt clean and the noise of judgment couldn't reach her. She stood at the edge, boots planted on concrete still warm from the desert sun, watching F-35s trace white lines across the Nevada darkness. 28 years old, and she'd already lived 3 lifetimes to tour in Afghanistan as a Navy SEAL, 1 year flying support missions in Syria, and now this, wearing a flight suit 2 sizes too big at the Air Force's elite fighter weapons school, surrounded by pilots half her age who looked at her like she was a clerical error someone would eventually correct. The wind carried voices up from the stairwell behind her. Laughter. The kind that came easy to people who'd never had to earn their place in a room. She didn't turn around. Didn't need to. She'd heard that particular brand of contempt before in 100 different accents, always meaning the same thing. Look who's playing pilot. The voice belonged to Cadet Mason Ridley, a legacy kid whose father wore stars on his shoulders and whose grandfather had a building named after him at the Pentagon. He emerged onto the rooftop flanked by 3 others, all of them wearing matching smirks and the kind of confidence that came from never being told no. Shouldn't you be filing paperwork or whatever it is diversity hires do after hours? Kieran kept her eyes on the horizon. The F-35s had disappeared into clouds now, leaving only the memory of their passage. Shouldn't you be studying? I noticed you botched the intercept geometry on today's simulation. Again. Her voice was flat, almost bored. She'd learned early that showing emotion around predators just made them bite harder. Ridley's smirk fractured into something uglier. He stepped closer, bringing with him the smell of energy drinks and entitlement. You know what your problem is, Voss. You actually think you belong here. You think because you played commando in some sandbox and learned to fly a helicopter, that makes you one of us. He gestured to his friends who were fanning out now, forming a loose semicircle. But everyone knows the truth. You're a publicity stunt. A checkbox the brass needs to tick so they can pretend they care about equality. The others laughed on cue. One of them, a sandy-haired kid named Tors who'd never flown anything more dangerous than his father's Cessna, pulled out his phone and started recording. "This is gonna be great for the group chat," he said. Kieran finally turned to face them. Her expression hadn't changed. In the darkness, with the glow of distant runway lights catching the scar that ran from her left temple to her jaw, she looked less like a cadet and more like something that had crawled out of a war and learned to wear a human face. "You should go back downstairs," she said quietly. "Or what?" Ridley took another step forward. "You gonna cry to the commandant? Tell them we hurt your feelings." He was close enough now that she could see the vein pulsing in his neck, the way his hands had curled into fists. This wasn't about flying. It had never been about flying. This was about a boy raised on stories of his grandfather's victories who couldn't stomach the idea that someone like her might actually be better. "I'm giving you a chance to walk away," Kieran said. "That's more than I usually offer." Ridley laughed. It was a harsh sound full of edges. "You hear that? She's threatening us." He glanced back at his friends, playing to his audience. "What are you gonna do, Voss? Show us some of those Hollywood SEAL moves we're not scared of." He moved fast, closing the distance between them with his hand raised. Whether he meant to shove her or just get in her face didn't matter. What mattered was that Kieran didn't flinch. Her body responded with muscle memory carved from 1,000 combat drills, shifting weight and angle in a movement so economical it barely looked like motion at all. One moment Ridley was reaching for her. The next he was stumbling backward, his own momentum betrayed, his center of gravity all wrong. His heel caught the raised edge of the rooftop access panel. He windmilled, eyes going wide with the sudden understanding that physics doesn't care about your last name or your father's rank. Kieran's hand shot out, catching the front of his flight suit in a grip that probably hurt but definitely stopped him from going over. The others froze, phones still recording, suddenly understanding that they'd wandered into something beyond their comprehension. "You grabbed me," Ridley hissed once he'd found his voice. His face had gone white. You assaulted me, that's it. You're done, finished. I'll have you court-martialed, I'll have you. You slipped, Kieran said. She released him with a small push that sent him stumbling toward his friends. Clumsy footwork, same problem you have in the cockpit. She turned back to the edge of the rooftop, dismissing them. Now get the hell out of here before I decide to file a report about 4 cadets violating curfew and harassing a fellow officer. For a moment, no one moved. Then Tors, still holding his phone, said, "Let's go, man, this is bullshit." But Ridley wasn't finished. She could hear it in the way he was breathing, harsh and ragged, could feel the rage coming off him in waves. "Die, bitch," he said. And then hands were on her back, shoving hard, and the rooftop was falling away beneath her feet, and the desert night was rushing up to meet her with the promise of concrete and finality. Kieran Voss had survived 3 IED blasts, 2 helicopter crashes, and a firefight in Helmand Province that left her the only member of her squad still breathing. She'd pulled wounded teammates through smoke and blood while taking rounds to her vest. She'd learned to fly in conditions that would ground commercial pilots. She'd earned her trident in a class where instructors told her daily that she didn't belong, that she'd never make it, that nature itself had decided women weren't built for this kind of work. Falling off a 3-story building wasn't even in her top 10 worst Tuesdays. Her body twisted midair, instinct taking over before conscious thought could interfere. She spotted the maintenance ladder bolted to the building's facade, the one she'd noticed her first week here, cataloged automatically the way operators catalog every exit and advantage in any given space. Her hand shot out, caught a rung, and her shoulder screamed in protest as her weight swung hard against the building. But she held on, always held on. That was the whole point of becoming a SEAL, wasn't it? To be the person who held on when everyone else let go. She hung there for a moment, 3 stories above ground, arm burning, listening to the voices above. "Holy shit," someone was saying. "Holy shit, did we? No one saw anything," Ridley cut in, voice tight with panic. She was drunk. She was leaning over. It was an accident. That's what happened. Everyone agree. Everyone fucking agree. The sound of feet on concrete running now. Then silence. Kieran pulled herself onto the ladder properly, tested her weight, then climbed down with methodical precision. When her boots hit dirt, she stood for a moment in the shadow of the building, breathing steady, checking her body for damage. Bruised shoulder. Maybe a cracked rib from where she'd hit the ladder. Nothing that wouldn't heal. Nothing that would keep her from flying. She walked back to her quarters through empty streets, past darkened buildings and sleeping aircraft. The base was quiet at this hour, just the distant hum of generators and the occasional bark of a guard dog. In her room, a closet-sized space that smelled like disinfectant and old regretchi, sat on the edge of her bunk and examined her hands. They were steady. They'd been steady when she'd caught the ladder. They'd be steady tomorrow when she climbed into a cockpit. The phone on her desk buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "We have a video. You grabbed him first. Self-defense won't save you. Drop out of the program tomorrow or we send it to every news outlet that loves stories about violent women in the military." She read it twice, then set the phone down. Didn't reply. In the morning, she'd report what happened. Would file official paperwork, trigger investigations, watch her name get dragged through the kind of military bureaucracy that ground good people to dust while protecting the sons of generals. Or she wouldn't. She lay back on her bunk and stared at the ceiling. Somewhere across the base, 4 cadets were probably celebrating, convinced they'd solved their problem. Convinced that fear would do what mockery couldn't. They didn't understand that you couldn't threaten someone who'd already died. Not literally, though she'd been close enough to count, but in the way that mattered. The Kieran Voss who'd cared about fairness and justice, and being liked had burned up in a transport helicopter over Kandahar, taking rounds from all sides, watching her team leader bleed out in her arms while she kept the bird level enough for the others to bail. What crawled out of that fire didn't scare easy. She closed her eyes, slept dreamlessly for 5 hours, woke at 0500 to her alarm and the smell of jet fuel drifting through the window, got up, got dressed, tied her boots with the same mechanical precision she applied to everything. In the mirror, the scar on her temple caught the light, a souvenir from Helmand, one of many. She touched it briefly, then headed for the flight line. No one was going to chase her off. Not four privileged kids, not their threats. Not the weight of institutional prejudice that had been trying to crush her since she'd first raised her hand and said she wanted to serve. The briefing room was already half full when she arrived. Conversations died as she walked in. Eyes tracked her movement. Word traveled fast in communities this small, even without video evidence. She could read the question on every face. What happened last night? But no one asked. No one ever asked. They just watched and waited for her to break or leave or give them an excuse to confirm what they'd already decided about her. Kieran took her seat in the back row, pulled out her tablet, reviewed the day's training schedule like nothing had happened, because in the calculus of her life, nothing had. This was just another Tuesday in a long series of Tuesdays where people underestimated her competence and overestimated their power. The briefing officer, a lieutenant colonel named Marcus Shaw who'd flown F-16s in Desert Storm and carried himself like he'd invented the concept of air superiority, stepped to the podium. His eyes found Kieran immediately, held her gaze for a beat longer than necessary. Then he cleared his throat and began. Today's exercise is advanced air-to-ground integration. You'll be working in pairs, one aircraft handling threat suppression while the other delivers ordnance on target. Winds are gusting to 30 knots. Visibility is good, but the sun will be directly in your eyes during the approach window. I want clean runs, precise timing, and no heroics. He clicked through slides showing the target range, threat arrays, scoring criteria, standard stuff. Then he paused. Cadet Voss. The room went silent. Kieran looked up from her tablet. Sir. You'll be paired with Cadet Ridley today. He'll handle suppression. You're on delivery. Shaw's expression was unreadable. Was this punishment? A test? An opportunity for Ridley to sabotage her in a way that looked like training? Any questions? No, sir. Her voice was steady, empty of inflection. If Shaw was looking for a reaction, he wouldn't find one. Good, brief with your partner. Wheels up in 90 minutes. He moved on to the next pair, but the tension in the room remained thick as smoke. When the briefing ended, cadets filed out in clusters, voices low, occasionally glancing back at Kieran. She stayed seated, finishing her notes, taking her time. When she finally stood and turned toward the door, Ridley was blocking her path. He looked worse than she did. Dark circles under his eyes, a muscle jumping in his jaw. The supreme confidence from last night had been replaced by something more volatile, the desperate energy of someone who'd realized his actions might have consequences. We need to talk, he said quietly. No, we don't. Kieran moved to step around him. He shifted to block her again. I know you're going to report what happened. I know you're probably already talking to lawyers or whatever. His words came fast, tumbling over each other. But before you destroy my career, before you turn this into some huge media thing, just listen for a second. It was a mistake. We were drunk. Things got out of hand. You're fine. Nothing actually happened. Can't we just move past it? Kieran studied him with the same detached interest she might give to a maintenance checklist. Get out of my way, cadet. My father is General Marcus Ridley. My grandfather was General Thomas Ridley. Do you understand what that means? One call and your life becomes very difficult, not just here, everywhere. You think anyone will hire a pilot with a dishonorable discharge. You think civilian airlines want someone with a record of assault. He was sweating now despite the air conditioning. Just walk away, transfer to another program. I'll even write you a recommendation. We can both move on. You tried to kill me. The words came out flat, factual, like she was reading coordinates off a map. You shoved me off a 3-story building, and now you're threatening me. Does that about cover it? Ridley's face flushed. It wasn't you grabbed me first, the video shows. The video shows you and 3 other cadets cornering me on a rooftop after midnight. Shows you invading my space. Shows me using minimal force to stop you from putting hands on me. Then shows me falling. What it doesn't show is the 15 seconds after, where you stood there discussing how to spin my death as an accident. She tilted her head slightly. But I'm sure your father's lawyers will figure something out. They always do. She pushed past him before he could respond, leaving him standing in the empty briefing room with his family name and his threats and the growing understanding that he'd badly miscalculated. Outside, the Nevada sun was already baking the tarmac. Heat shimmers rose from the runway like questions made of light. Kieran walked toward the flight line, toward the F-16 she'd be taking up, its metal skin gleaming under relentless blue. This was the part she understood, the part that made sense. Up there, skill mattered, precision mattered. You either made the shot or you didn't. Politics couldn't reach you at 30,000 feet. The crew chief, a master sergeant named Paula Reeves who'd been turning wrenches since before Kieran was born, looked up from her pre-flight check as Kieran approached. "Morning, warrant officer. She's ready when you are." Her tone was professionally neutral, but her eyes held questions. Everyone had questions. "Thanks, Sergeant." Kieran began her walk-around, checking control surfaces, examining panels, running through the same ritual she'd performed hundreds of times. The F-16 was a beautiful machine, a perfect marriage of violence and grace, designed to do one thing exceptionally well. She understood that, respected it, maybe even loved it in the way you could love something that never judged you, never questioned your right to exist, just responded to your inputs with mathematical precision. Ridley's F-16 sat 30 yards away. She could see him doing his own walk-around, movement stiff with tension. Whatever conversation he was having with his crew chief looked heated. The sergeant kept shaking her head, pointing at something on the aircraft. Finally, Ridley threw up his hands and stalked toward the ready room. Moments later, another cadet, a quiet kid named Park who usually kept his head down and flew like he'd been born in a cockpit, emerged and headed for Ridley's aircraft. Shaw appeared at Kieran's elbow. "Change of plans. Ridley's feeling under the weather. Park will handle your suppression." He studied her face, looking for something. "That going to be a problem?" "No, sir." Park's solid. She meant it. In the air, Park was smooth, professional, unflappable, everything Ridley pretended to be. "Good." Shaw didn't move. "Voss, I'm going to ask you a question and I want the truth. Did something happen last night?" Here it was, the moment where she could burn it all down, where she could demand justice and investigation and watch the institution tear itself apart trying to protect a general's son while pretending to care about a woman who'd actually earned her place. Or she could do what she'd always done, absorb the hit, stay focused on the mission, prove her worth through action instead of accusation. "Nothing worth discussing, sir." The words tasted like ash, like surrender. But maybe surrender was just strategy by another name. Maybe the best way to win was to make them face what they'd underestimated in the only arena that mattered. Shaw's jaw tightened. He nodded once sharply. "All right then, good hunting." He walked away, leaving her alone with her aircraft and her choices. She finished the walk-around, climbed the ladder, settled into the cockpit with practiced ease. The F-16 wrapped around her like a second skin, familiar and right in a way few things were. She ran through startup procedures, listening to the engine's rising whine, feeling power gather beneath her. Tower cleared them for taxi. Park's voice came over the radio, calm and professional. "Ghost 21 ready to copy." Kieran keyed her mic. "Ghost 2122, standard suppression profile. I'll take the northern approach. Confirm package ready." 21 confirms, package ready, good to go on your mark. They taxied into position, ran final checks. Then the tower, "Ghost flight, you're cleared for takeoff. Winds 270 at 25, gusting to 32. Fly safe." Kieran pushed the throttle forward. The F-16 leaped forward like it had been waiting its whole life for this moment. Acceleration pressed her back into the seat. The numbers climbed 80, 100, 120. The nose came up. The ground fell away. And then she was flying, really flying, with nothing between her and the sky but skill and will and the absolute certainty that up here, she was exactly where she belonged. The target range sprawled below like a sculptor's model tan earth marked with concentric circles, vehicle hulks arranged in defensive positions, electronic threat emitters waiting to paint them with simulated missiles. Park's aircraft appeared off her right wing, gray ghost against deeper blue. His positioning was perfect. Textbook spacing. 2-1 has radar contact on threats, designating primary and secondary. Stand by. Park's voice had the same quality hers did in the cockpit, focused, professional, empty of everything except mission. This was the language they both spoke fluently. 2-2, you're clear to begin approach. I'll keep them looking at me. 2-2 copies, beginning run. Kieran banked left, dropping altitude, letting the desert floor rise up to meet her. G-forces tugged at her body, familiar weight, familiar discomfort. She'd learned to love it. The ground rushed beneath her at hundreds of miles per hour, detail resolving from blur into specificity. Sagebrush, rocks, the skeletal remains of an old mining operation. The target zone appeared ahead, threats already lighting up her warning systems. But Park was doing his job, transmitting on the frequencies that made their electronic brains think he was the danger, drawing their attention like a matador's cape. She armed weapons, selected target, let the computer solve ballistics while her hands made minute corrections, bringing crosshairs and reality into alignment. The world narrowed to numbers, angles, timing. Everything else fell away. Last night's violence, this morning's threats, the weight of being a woman in spaces designed to exclude women. Up here, none of it mattered. Up here, physics was the only authority and skill was the only currency. 2-2 target locked. 3 seconds. She counted down silently. Let her training take over. When the moment arrived, that perfect intersection of speed and trajectory and release, she pickled off her ordnance and pulled up hard, climbing away from the threats that were now swinging their attention toward her. Behind her, the target erupted in simulated destruction. Clean hit. Center mass. Ghost 2-2, good impact. Direct hit on primary target. The range controller's voice held a note of approval. Excellent run. Ghost 2-1, you're clear to egress. They climbed together, breaking above 10,000 feet where the air was thin and cold and clear. Park came up on the radio. Nice flying, 2-2. That was surgical. Couldn't have done it without good suppression. You made them look the wrong way at the right time. That's the job. A pause. Hey, Voss, for what it's worth, most of us know you're good. Don't let the loud ones make you think otherwise. She didn't know how to respond to that. Kindness from fellow pilots was rarer than perfect weather. Thanks, Park. Let's head home. They flew back in formation. 2 gray birds against endless blue, engines trailing heat and purpose. Below, the desert scrolled past unchanged and uncaring. Above, the sun continued its arc. And Kieran Voss, warrant officer and combat veteran and woman who'd survived being thrown off a building 12 hours ago, guided her aircraft toward the runway with hands that never trembled and a mind that never forgot that survival wasn't the same as victory. But sometimes it was close enough. She landed with textbook precision, taxied to the line, shut down systems in proper sequence. When she climbed out of the cockpit, Sergeant Reeves was waiting with a water bottle and a knowing look. Heard you painted the target pretty good out there. Just doing the job, Sergeant. Yeah, that's what they all say. Reeves glanced toward the ready room where cadets were gathering, no doubt analyzing everyone's performance with the brutal honesty of pilots who knew that critique saved lives. You planning to stick around? Finish the program. Why wouldn't I? Reeves smiled. It wasn't a particularly warm expression. No reason, just seems like some folks around here might prefer if you didn't. She handed over the water bottle. But between you and me, I've been on this flight line for 23 years. Seen a lot of hotshots come through thinking they're God's gift to aviation. Most of them were decent. Some were great. None of them had your discipline. Whatever you did before you got here, it shows. Keep that up and they'll run out of reasons to doubt you. Kieran drank half the bottle in one pull. The water was cold enough to hurt. Thanks, Sergeant. Don't thank me. Just keep making me look good by bringing my aircraft back in one piece. Reeves turned back to her maintenance crew, already calling out positions for the post-flight inspection. Kieran walked toward the ready room, feeling the weight of attention that came with being different in a place that valued conformity. But weight was just weight. She'd carried heavier. The debriefing lasted an hour. Instructors broke down each run, highlighted mistakes, praised successes. Park's suppression timing got lauded. Kieran's target accuracy earned a nod from Shaw and nothing more. She hadn't expected praise, hadn't wanted it. What mattered was that no one could say she wasn't qualified. No one could claim her presence was charity or politics. The numbers didn't lie. The aircraft didn't lie. Everything else was just noise. Afterward, as cadets dispersed toward lunch or additional training, or whatever ways they killed time between flights, Kieran headed for the legal office. It was a small building near the base hospital, staffed by JAG officers who'd probably rather be anywhere else. She knocked on the door of Captain Michelle Torsno, relation to the cadet with the same name, and waited. "Come in." Tors looked up from a stack of paperwork that seemed designed to make trees cry. She was maybe 40, with dark hair going gray at the temples and the weary expression of someone who'd spent a career explaining regulations to people who didn't want to hear them. "Warrant Officer Voss, have a seat. What can I do for you?" Kieran closed the door behind her, sat, laid out the facts with the same precision she applied to target coordinates. 4 cadets, rooftop confrontation, physical contact, 3-story fall, video evidence, threats. She didn't embellish, didn't editorialize, just delivered information and waited. Tors listened without interrupting, took notes in neat handwriting. When Kieran finished, the captain set down her pen and leaned back in her chair. "You understand what happens next if you file formal charges?" "Yes, ma'am." "There will be an investigation, statements, interviews, the video will be examined. If what you're telling me is accurate and I have no reason to doubt you, then we're looking at assault charges minimum, possibly attempted murder depending on how the prosecutor wants to frame it. Cadet Ridley's father will hire expensive lawyers. There will be media attention. Your name will be in newspapers. People will have opinions about you, most of them wrong. Your presence in this program will be questioned. Your entire military record will be scrutinized for anything that might make you look unstable or aggressive. They will try to destroy you to save him." "I know." Kieran's voice stayed level. She'd known all this before walking in, had calculated the cost. Tors picked up her pen again, clicked it absently. "I'm going to tell you something off the record. You're within your rights to pursue this. You should pursue this. What happened was criminal and wrong, and those cadets should face consequences. But if you do, your career in aviation is probably over. Not because you did anything wrong, but because the institution will make it impossible for you to continue. That's not fair. It's not right, but it's reality." "So you're saying I should do nothing, let them get away with it?" There was no heat in Kieran's words, just the question. "I'm saying you need to decide what you're willing to sacrifice for justice, because make no mistake, you'll be the one who sacrifices, not them." Tors met her eyes. "If you want to file charges, I'll help you. I'll make sure everything is documented properly. I'll fight for you, but I can't promise the fight will be worth what it costs." Kieran stood. "I need to think about it." "Take the time you need, but Voss," the captain's expression softened slightly, "whatever you decide, make sure it's your choice, not theirs. Don't let them take anything else from you." Outside, the afternoon heat was oppressive. Kieran walked without destination, letting her feet carry her toward the edges of the base where buildings gave way to desert and the noise of human activity faded into wind and distance. She found herself at the perimeter fence, looking out at miles of nothing punctuated by distant mountains. This was what she joined for, not the politics or the glory or even the flying specifically. Just this, the chance to be part of something larger than herself, to serve, to protect, to matter in ways that transcended the small cruelties of people who measured worth by last names and gender. But maybe that had always been naive. Maybe institutions couldn't be better than the people who populated them. Maybe she'd spent years proving herself in hopes of reaching some threshold where proof wouldn't be necessary anymore, only to discover the threshold kept moving, stayed always just beyond reach. Her phone buzzed. Another unknown number. She almost didn't check it, but some instinct made her look. The message was simple: you flew well today. Keep flying well and they'll run out of ammunition. A friend. She read it 3 times, didn't recognize the number, couldn't identify the sender, but something about those words settled into her chest like warmth, like permission to choose strategy over righteousness. She deleted the message, turned back toward base, made her decision. She wouldn't file charges, wouldn't give them the satisfaction of watching her get ground up by military bureaucracy, wouldn't let 4 privileged kids derail her from the only thing she'd ever wanted. Instead, she'd do what she'd always done: fly better than them, work harder, be so undeniably competent that even their prejudice couldn't find purchase. She'd make them respect her not through complaints or lawyers or media attention, but through the simple, irrefutable fact of her excellence. It wasn't justice, but maybe it was something better. Maybe it was victory. The next morning, she was back on the flight line before dawn. The sky was still purple-black when she began her walk-around, checking her aircraft with the same meticulous attention she always brought. Other cadets trickled in as the sun climbed, bleary-eyed, clutching coffee, moving with the resigned energy of people facing another day of being pushed to their limits. Park gave her a nod. A few others offered tentative greetings. Ridley appeared last, looking like he hadn't slept. Their eyes met across 30 yards of tarmac. He looked away first. The days began to blur together. More flights, more training, more opportunities to prove or disprove whatever theories people carried about her competence. Kieran let the work speak. Every target she hit, every maneuver she executed with precision, every brief where her tactical analysis was sharp and her communication clear. The mockery didn't disappear, probably never would, but it grew quieter, more uncertain. Hard to call someone a diversity hire when they outfly half the class. 2 weeks after the Rooftop incident, Shaw pulled her aside after a particularly grueling air combat session. "Voss, you got a minute?" They walked to his office in silence. She braced for bad news. Maybe Ridley's father had finally made a call. Maybe someone had decided her presence was too much trouble. Shaw closed the door, gestured to a chair. She sat. "I'm going to ask you again," he said, "and I want the truth this time. Did something happen between you and Cadet Ridley?" When she didn't respond immediately, he continued. "I'm asking because his performance has gone to shit. He's missing checkpoints, overextending on maneuvers. Yesterday he nearly caused a mid-air collision because he wasn't maintaining proper spacing. That's not the pilot who started this program. Something changed, and it changed right around the time you two got paired up." Kieran chose her words carefully. "There was an incident. It's been handled." "Handled how? Through official channels?" "No, sir, just handled." Shaw studied her for a long moment. Behind him, through the window, F-16s taxied toward the runway like gray sharks prowling shallow water. Finally he said, "You know what I think? I think something happened that should have resulted in charges and paperwork and probably a court-martial. I think you declined to pursue it because you didn't want the hassle, and I think that was probably a mistake." He held up a hand before she could respond. "But it's your mistake to make, your life, your career. Just understand that sometimes the hassle exists for a reason. Sometimes going through official channels is how we prevent the next incident. Respectfully, sir, I've filed complaints before. In other units, other situations. You know what happened? Nothing. Investigations that went nowhere. Promises that nothing changed.